Every man who has ever chased a woman has experienced the same sickening paradox. The harder you run toward her, the faster she moves away. The more texts you send, the shorter hers become. The more available you make yourself, the less available she wants to be. The more you show her you care, the less she seems to care back. And you're standing there out of breath, dignity in pieces, wondering how wanting someone this much could possibly be the thing that's pushing them away. It doesn't make sense until it does. Until you realize that chasing and hunting are two completely different acts driven by two completely different psychologies and producing two completely opposite results. One makes you prey disguised as a pursuer, the other makes you a force she cannot escape. Not because you cornered her, but because she stopped wanting to run. Niccolo Machiavelli understood this distinction 5 centuries before you were born. He watched princes chase alliances and lose everything. He watched generals chase victories and walk into traps. He watched politicians chase popularity and become despised for the very desperation that drove the chase. And then he watched a different kind of man operate. A patient man, a strategic man, a man who never chased anything in his life, but somehow ended up with everything the chasers wanted. Machiavelli studied that man, decoded him, wrote down his methods in ink that still hasn't dried. And today I'm going to translate those methods into the psychology of desire so precisely that by the time we're done, you'll understand not just why chasing fails, but exactly how hunting works. Step by step, principle by principle. From the first moment you see her to the moment she realizes she's been yours all along. Let's start with the biology because until you understand what's happening inside her brain when you chase, you'll keep doing it and keep wondering why it doesn't work. When a man chases, he broadcasts a cluster of signals that her nervous system interprets in a very specific and very unflattering way. These signals aren't processed consciously, they're processed by the same ancient threat detection system that kept her ancestors alive on the savannah. The system that decides in milliseconds whether an approaching entity is safe, dangerous, or irrelevant. Chasing triggers a category her conscious mind would never assign you to. Threat. Not physical threat. Psychological threat. The threat of someone who wants something from her badly enough that they might not respect her boundaries in getting it. The threat of emotional obligation. The threat of someone whose need for her response is so visible, so urgent, so relentless that managing his emotions might become her responsibility. Her system doesn't care that you're a good guy. It doesn't care that your intentions are pure. It reads the behavioral pattern, the constant texting, the immediate availability, the emotional flooding, and it files you in the same category as every other entity that has ever approached with too much intensity and too little restraint. Potential drain. And once you're filed there, her behavior shifts automatically. Responses slow down, warmth decreases, availability shrinks. She creates distance not because she decided to, but because her nervous system decided for her. It's pulling her away from a perceived energy deficit. A man who takes more than he provides, a man whose presence costs more emotional energy than it generates. Machiavelli observed the identical dynamic in politics with devastating precision. In Chapter 3 of The Prince, he analyzes how rulers lose newly acquired territories. His answer is relevant to your love life in a way that should make you uncomfortable. He says the ruler who moves too aggressively to secure a new territory actually destabilizes it. The heavy presence of troops, the constant displays of authority, the visible urgency to control, all of these create resentment in the very population the ruler is trying to win. They don't feel governed. They feel occupied. And occupied populations rebel, always, without exception. Your texts are troops. Your constant availability is a garrison. Your eagerness is a flag planted in soil that hasn't been earned. And she's not falling in love. She's planning her rebellion. Now let me show you what hunting looks like. Because the difference isn't just behavioral, it's psychological. It's philosophical. It's a complete restructuring of how you relate to desire itself. A hunter doesn't run toward his target. That's the first and most fundamental distinction. He moves toward it with patience, precision, and an almost unsettling calm. He studies the terrain before he enters it. He learns the patterns of his prey before making a single move. He positions himself where the prey will come to him rather than exhausting himself chasing it across open ground. And he waits. not passively, not helplessly, with the loaded, coiled, fully alert patience of a man who knows that timing is everything and that acting too early is worse than not acting at all. Machiavelli was obsessed with timing. It runs through every page of his work like a heartbeat. He wrote that the man who succeeds is the one whose methods match the demands of the moment. Act too soon and you waste your force. Act too late and the opportunity has passed. The art is in reading the moment so accurately that when you do act, the action feels inevitable rather than forced. Translate this into your interactions with women and the implications rewrite everything you've been taught. The hunter doesn't text her the moment he gets her number. He lets the anticipation build, not as a game, because he genuinely has other things occupying his attention, and her number, while welcome, doesn't rearrange his priorities. The hunter doesn't immediately propose a date. He creates a few exchanges that establish his energy, his humor, his depth. And then he proposes, not eagerly, not tentatively, with the direct, unhurried confidence of a man who's offering something rather than requesting something. The hunter doesn't fill every silence with nervous energy. When the conversation naturally pauses, he lets the pause exist. He doesn't interpret silence as rejection. He interprets it as space. Space that her mind will fill with thoughts about him if he doesn't fill it with desperation first. Each of these behaviors communicates the same underlying message, a message so rare in the modern dating landscape that it stops women in their tracks. This man has options. This man has a life. This man is choosing to engage with me, and his choice feels deliberate, not desperate. That deliberateness is the hunter's greatest weapon, because deliberate pursuit feels like being selected. And being selected by a man who clearly doesn't need to select anyone is one of the most intoxicating experiences a woman can have. Machiavelli saw this in the alliances he studied. The prince who carefully chose his allies was valued by those allies. The prince who begged for alliances was discarded by them. Same relationship, different energy, completely different outcome. She doesn't want to be your only option. She wants to be your best option. And the gap between only and best is the gap between chasing and hunting. One communicates scarcity, the other communicates standards. And standards are attractive in a way that scarcity never will be. A hunter never enters unfamiliar terrain blind. He scouts. He observes. He learns the landscape so thoroughly that by the time he takes his first step into it, he already knows where the high ground is, where the cover is, and where the opportunities are. Machiavelli dedicated more time to reconnaissance than to any other element of strategy. He believed and argued repeatedly that the prince who understands the territory he's entering has already won half the battle, not through force, through knowledge. Most men approach women blind. They see attraction and they move, immediately, impulsively, without spending a single second observing who this person actually is, what she responds to, what she needs, what she's performing versus what she's concealing. The hunter watches first, not in a creepy way, in a perceptive way. He pays attention at the party, in the coffee shop, in the group setting, wherever the first encounter happens. He notices things that the chaser, blinded by his own eagerness, completely misses. He notices her energy when she's talking to different people. With some, she's animated. With others, she's polite but closed. The difference tells him who she's comfortable with and what kind of energy she gravitates toward. He notices what she laughs at, not the polite laugh she gives to everyone, the real one, the one that catches her off guard, the one she covers with her hand because it was louder than she intended. What triggered that laugh tells him more about her sense of humor than any conversation ever could. He notices her body language when she thinks nobody's watching, the way she holds her drink, where her eyes go during silences, whether she leans in or maintains distance, whether she touches her hair, her neck, her collarbone. Each micro-behavior is a sentence in a language most men never learn to read. By the time the hunter approaches, he already knows something about her that she hasn't told him. And that knowledge shapes an approach so tailored, so specific, so different from the generic openers she's received from every other man that night, that it cuts through her defenses like they weren't there. Not because he said something brilliant, because he said something relevant. Something that told her in the first 10 seconds that this man was paying attention, real attention, the kind that notices, the kind that reads, the kind that sees past the performance to the person underneath. Machiavelli called this understanding the humors of the people. Every population has its temperament, its needs, its grievances. The prince who understands these humors governs effectively. The prince who ignores them governs briefly. She has humors too, emotional needs that are being met by some people in her life and neglected by others. Conversational frequencies that light her up and frequencies that bore her. A specific kind of attention that she craves but rarely receives because most men are too busy broadcasting to bother receiving. Read her humors, then speak to them. Not with flattery, not with manipulation, with the genuine observational insight of a man who looked before he leapt and liked what he saw enough to approach with something real. Here's where Machiavelli's military strategy becomes directly applicable and where the distinction between chasing and hunting becomes three-dimensional. In chapter 12 of The Prince, Machiavelli writes extensively about the importance of fighting on your own terrain. A prince who fights on foreign soil stretches his supply lines, exhausts his troops, and operates in an environment that favors his enemy. A prince who draws the enemy onto his own terrain controls every variable, the landscape, the timing, the resources, the angle of engagement. Chasing a woman is fighting on foreign terrain. You're operating in her world, on her schedule, around her preferences, in her emotional landscape. You're adapting to her, adjusting to her, reshaping yourself to fit into the space she's willing to give you. Hunting is drawing her onto your terrain, building a life, an energy, an identity so compelling that she moves toward you. Not because you pulled her, because the gravity of your world is stronger than the gravity of everyone else's. Practically, this looks like something most men never think to do. Instead of taking her to the restaurant she suggested, you take her somewhere that means something to you, a place that reveals who you are, a setting where you're comfortable, confident, and in your element. Instead of adapting your communication style to match hers, you establish your own rhythm. You text when you text. You call when you call. You respond at a pace that reflects a full life rather than an empty phone. And she adjusts to your rhythm because your rhythm communicates something hers doesn't. Stability, consistency, the unmovable center of a man who isn't performing spontaneity, but living according to his own internal clock. Instead of asking what she wants to do, you decide. Not aggressively, not dismissively, with the quiet authority of a man who has already thought about it and arrived at a conclusion. I'm going to this place Saturday. You should come. Not, where do you want to go? Not, what are you in the mood for? Not, I'm flexible, whatever you want. I'm going here. Join me. That sentence structure, invitation rather than negotiation, is the verbal architecture of a hunter. It says, my life is happening with or without you, and I'm offering you a seat at my table, not begging for a seat at yours. Machiavelli would recognize this as the strategy of the prince who makes his kingdom so prosperous, so well-ordered, so desirable that neighboring states seek alliance rather than needing to be courted. The prince doesn't chase allies. He builds a kingdom worth allying with, and the allies come to him. Build your kingdom, your physical health, your mental sharpness, your social circle, your financial trajectory, your creative output, your emotional maturity. Build it until it hums with the energy of a life being lived at full capacity, and then let her enter that life on your terms. Not because you're controlling, because a life this full has a natural structure, and respecting that structure is the entry fee for admission. She won't resent the structure, she'll be grateful for it, because structure means stability. And stability, as we've discussed many times, is the thing women crave more than romance, more than passion, more than any fairy tale they were told as children. The hunter's approach is nothing like the chaser's approach. The chaser comes in hot, fast, obvious. His energy arrives before his words do. He's leaning in before he's spoken. His eyes are hungry before they're curious. Everything about him screams, I want something from you. And nothing about him whispers, I have something to offer you. The hunter approaches with controlled intensity, a specific kind of energy that is simultaneously warm and restrained, present and unhurried, interested and unattached. It's the energy of a man who has seen something that caught his attention and is investigating it with genuine curiosity rather than predetermined desire. Machiavelli described this energy in the context of diplomacy. The ambassador who arrives at a foreign court should appear interested but never eager, engaged but never dependent on the outcome, respectful of the other party's power but never diminished by it. This balance, interest without neediness, engagement without attachment, respect without submission, is what Machiavelli considered the foundation of effective diplomacy. It's also the foundation of effective approach. When the hunter speaks to her, his questions are genuine, not interview questions, not the biographical interrogation that passes for conversation in modern dating. Questions that come from actual curiosity about who she is beyond the surface. Questions that demonstrate he's thinking about what she's saying rather than waiting for his turn to impress her. When the hunter listens, he actually listens, not the performative listening where you nod and wait for an opening to redirect the conversation to yourself. The kind of listening where you hear something she said and it connects to something you've thought about, and you bring that connection into the conversation naturally. The kind of listening that makes her feel like she's not just talking, but being understood. And when the hunter decides he's interested, he communicates it without flooding, a direct statement, a clear indication, not wrapped in 6 layers of plausible deniability, not hidden behind humor so thick she can't tell if he's serious. A simple, confident, unhurried declaration. I'd like to see you again. Not, maybe we could hang out sometime if you're free. Not, it would be cool to grab coffee or something. Not the verbal equivalent of tiptoeing through a minefield where every word is chosen to minimize the risk of rejection. I'd like to see you again. Clean, direct, exposing just enough vulnerability to demonstrate courage without exposing so much that it becomes pressure. The hunter makes his intention known and then steps back. He doesn't push for an immediate answer. He doesn't fill the silence with qualifications or backup plans. He makes the statement, lets it exist in the air between them, and trusts her to respond in her own time. That trust, the willingness to let space exist after a declaration, is one of the most attractive things a man can display because it communicates something she almost never encounters. A man who is comfortable with uncertainty. A man who can tolerate not knowing. A man whose self-worth doesn't hang on her next sentence. Machiavelli wrote that the prince who can endure uncertainty without panic is the prince who survives the longest because uncertainty is the natural state of the world. And the man who needs certainty to function is a man who will be perpetually destabilized by reality. Make your move, then breathe. The outcome is not your responsibility. Your execution was. And if the execution was clean, the outcome takes care of itself. Here's where most men get confused. They understand the hunter's mindset in theory, but collapse back into chasing the moment they start pursuing because pursuing and chasing feel similar from the inside. Both involve forward movement. Both involve effort. Both involve wanting someone and taking action toward having them. The difference is internal, and the internal difference changes everything external. Chasing is movement driven by fear. Fear of losing her. Fear of missing the window. Fear that if you don't act now, constantly, intensely, she'll slip away. Chasing has a frantic quality, an urgency that comes not from panic, no matter how well disguised, leaks through every text, every call, every gesture. Pursuing is movement driven by desire. Clean, unhurried, grounded desire. The desire of a man who sees something he wants and moves toward it at his own pace, on his own terms, with the full knowledge that the wanting itself is enjoyable regardless of the outcome. Machiavelli distinguished between these two motivations throughout his work. He observed that princes who acted from fear made catastrophic decisions. They overcommitted to failing strategies because they were afraid to change course. They made concessions they didn't need to make because they feared the consequences of firmness. They moved too fast because they feared the consequences of patience. Princes who acted from desire, from a positive vision of what they wanted to build, rather than a reactive fear of what they might lose, made better decisions at every turn. Their timing was better because they weren't rushed by panic. Their strategy was better because they weren't distorted by desperation. Their execution was better because they were operating from a settled center rather than a spinning periphery. Your pursuit of her should have this quality, the quality of a man moving towards something he wants, not running from something he fears. In practice, this looks like a consistent but unhurried rhythm of engagement. You reach out when you have something to say, not on a schedule designed to maintain contact, not to fill silence that makes you nervous. When you genuinely have a thought, an observation, an invitation that you want to share with her, you escalate when escalation feels natural, not because a timeline in your head says you should have kissed her by date 3, not because a podcast told you to establish physical contact within the first hour. When the moment presents itself, when the energy between you has built to a point where escalation is the natural next step, you step calmly, confidently, without the trembling urgency of a man who's been rehearsing this moment for 3 days, and you accept her responses, whatever they are, with equanimity. If she's warm, you enjoy the warmth without clutching it. If she's cool, you note the temperature without panicking about it. If she pulls back, you let the space exist without rushing to fill it. This equanimity isn't indifference. It's the quiet confidence of a man who knows that his value doesn't fluctuate based on her response. He's the same man whether she texts back in 30 seconds or 30 hours. The same man whether the date goes perfectly or awkwardly. The same man whether she says yes or no. That consistency is what transforms pursuit into hunting, because a hunter's identity isn't tied to whether this particular hunt succeeds. He knows there are other opportunities. He knows his skills are transferable. He knows that his worth as a hunter isn't determined by any single outcome. It's determined by his capability, his patience, and his willingness to stay in the game regardless of what happens today. That energy is irresistible, not because it's strategic, because it's real. And real is the one thing that cannot be faked, and the one thing she's been looking for underneath every interaction with every man who came before you. Machiavelli wrote that the prince must know when to strike, not before, not after. At the exact moment when conditions align, and decisiveness will produce the maximum result with the minimum resistance. In the psychology of desire, there is an equivalent moment, the moment when she has moved from curiosity to investment, when she's no longer evaluating you, but actively wanting you, when the power dynamic has shifted from your pursuit of her to something far more potent, mutual gravitation. You'll know this moment when it arrives, not because she says something specific, because the texture of the interaction changes. Her responses aren't just warm, they're eager. She's not just accepting your invitations, she's creating opportunities for you to make them. She's not just laughing at your humor, she's bringing her own. She's not leaning back, she's leaning forward. Not just physically, energetically, emotionally, with her whole self. This is the moment the hunter has been waiting for. And this is the moment where most men, even men who've done everything right up to this point, make a devastating mistake. They hesitate. After all that patience, after all that restraint, after weeks or months of measured, controlled, strategic pursuit, they reach the moment of commitment and they freeze because the same patience that served them during the hunt now works against them. They've trained themselves to hold back, and now the situation demands the opposite. Machiavelli would be ruthless about this. He wrote that there are times when caution serves the prince and times when only boldness will do. And the prince who cannot switch from one to the other, who is cautious when boldness is required or bold when caution is needed, will always be destroyed by his inflexibility. When the moment arrives, commit fully. Without the measured restraint that characterized everything before this point, tell her what you feel. Not in a flood, in a declaration. Clear, direct, unambiguous. With the same controlled intensity that defined your approach, but now with an added layer of raw, undeniable desire. Not, I think I might be developing feelings for you. Not, I'm not sure where this is going, but I like spending time with you. Something that leaves no room for interpretation. Something that stakes a claim without apologizing for it. Something that says, I've been patient, I've been deliberate, I've been watching and learning and waiting, and now I know you're what I want, and I'm not uncertain about it. That switch from patient restraint to decisive commitment is the most electrifying experience a woman can have with a man, because she's been watching the restraint. She's been feeling the controlled power behind it. She knows instinctively that a man who has shown this much discipline isn't acting from impulse. He's acting from conviction. And conviction, when it finally unleashes after prolonged containment, hits her with a force that scattered premature expression of interest never could. The chaser gives his commitment on day one. It arrives unwanted, unearned, and unimpressive, like a gift no one asked for. The hunter gives his commitment at the precise moment it will land deepest, after she's invested, after she's wondered, after she's lain awake at 2 a.m. trying to figure out what he's thinking, after her own desire has built to the point where his commitment doesn't just satisfy her, it releases her. That release, the exhale of a woman who finally knows she's chosen by a man whose choosing means something, is the reward for every minute of patience that preceded it. Let me distill everything into a code, not rules, a code. Something you carry internally that governs every interaction without needing to be consciously recalled. First principle, never move from need. Every action you take toward her should come from desire, not desperation. If you can't tell the difference in the moment, don't act. Wait until you can. The difference is felt in the body. Need contracts, desire expands. Need clenches, desire opens. Learn to read your own internal state before you act on it. Second principle, study before you engage. Observe, listen, read the room, her energy, her patterns before you commit any resources. Information gathered before engagement is worth more than effort expended after. Third principle, invite, never pursue. Position your life as the destination. Let your invitations be offerings, not requests. Come into my world is infinitely more attractive than please let me into yours. Fourth principle, tolerate uncertainty. Her silence is not rejection. Her distance is not dismissal. Uncertainty is the natural state of every interaction that hasn't yet resolved. The man who can sit comfortably in that uncertainty without panicking is the man who outlasts every other competitor. Fifth principle, strike when the iron is hot. Patience is a virtue until it becomes cowardice. When the moment demands action, act fully, boldly, without the restraint that served you before. Knowing the difference between patience and procrastination is the hunter's most critical skill. Sixth principle, maintain your world regardless of outcome. Whether she says yes, no, or nothing at all, your life continues at full velocity. Your mission continues. Your growth continues. Your daily architecture of discipline and purpose doesn't pause for any woman, because a man who pauses his life for a woman has just shown her that his life wasn't worth living without her. And that revelation is the death of desire. Machiavelli watched men chase their own destruction across the courts and battlefields of Renaissance Italy. He watched intelligent men make stupid decisions because desire clouded their judgment. He watched powerful men give away their power because wanting something too visibly turned them into beggars wearing crowns. And from that observation, he extracted a principle so fundamental that it governs every domain of human life. The man who chases puts the power in the hands of the thing he's chasing. The man who hunts keeps the power in his own. You've been chasing, maybe for years, maybe for your entire adult life, running after women who retreated further with every step you took, wondering why your devotion repelled instead of attracted, blaming yourself, blaming them, blaming the universe for a game that seemed fundamentally unfair. The game isn't unfair. You were playing it wrong. Stop chasing. Start hunting. Build a life so magnetic that pursuit becomes unnecessary. Develop patience so deep that her timeline doesn't destabilize yours. Cultivate perception so sharp that you see who she really is before she's shown you. And when the moment comes, when the alignment is right and the timing is perfect, and every instinct in your body says now, strike with the full force of a man who has earned this moment through discipline rather than stumbled into it through desperation. That man doesn't chase. He doesn't need to, because the energy he carries, the patient, perceptive, self-possessed energy of a hunter who knows his own value, creates a pull that no woman can resist and no chaser can replicate. Be the hunter, not because it's a better strategy, because it's the only way to truly win. If this breakdown of the hunter's psychology has changed the way you look at the pursuit of desire, please subscribe to the channel and like this video. We are currently excavating the historical strategies that have been buried for too long. Cultivate your own kingdom and plant the seeds for your future. The next vault of wisdom will be opened very soon.